Late at night, when the last visitors had left and the echo of applause had faded from the large hall, the building felt like a different world. The lights were dim, the seats sat empty like rows of silent watchers, and the air held a soft mix of dust and old music. In this quiet time, a young woman walked slowly across the stage with a mop and a small bucket. Her steps were gentle, the kind you make when you feel you are walking on something precious. Her name was Lyra, wherein she worked as a stage cleaner in the Performing Arts Center. Every night, she cleaned the floor, wiped the railings, dusted the seats, and made sure the stage looked perfect for the next day. She did the same work every evening, and many people barely noticed her when the shows were happening. They rushed past her with busy schedules, bright costumes, and loud laughter. She did not mind. She had learned to be comfortable in the background. The stage was a place of dreams for many, but for her, it was simply where she worked. But there was one thing about the stage that pulled at her heart every single night. The piano it sat on the left side of the stage. Its wood scratched from years of use, but still beautiful in its own quiet way. During the day, great performers sat at it, playing pieces that made the audience cry, cheer, or fall silent. Lyra always watched from far away as she swept the hall. She never got close. She felt it wasn't her place. But late at night, when she was alone, she would steal glances at it like a secret she was afraid to touch. Lyra had always loved music, not in a loud or bold way. She didn't talk about it with others, and she didn't play in front of anyone. Music was personal to her. It lived inside her the same way memories lived inside a small box you keep hidden under your bed. She had learned a little piano when she was younger, back when her life felt lighter. Her teacher was an older neighbor who had taught her small melodies and simple chords. Lyra loved those lessons, but they had ended long ago when her family had to move and life became too busy for anything extra. But even after many years, the sound of piano keys lived in her hands. She still remembered how to play, even if the world around her no longer knew she could. Sometimes, after finishing her cleaning, she would sit quietly on the edge of the stage and look at the piano. She would imagine herself walking toward it, sitting down and letting her fingers touch the cold, smooth keys. She imagined the soft sound of the first note. She imagined the way the music would fill the empty hall. But those were only imaginations. Thoughts, she allowed herself, because no one could hear thoughts. Lyra worked hard every day. The job did not pay much, but she needed it. She lived modestly, rented a small room, and rarely spent money on anything that wasn't necessary. Still, she did not complain. She felt grateful that she could work in a place filled with music, even if she could only listen from afar. Some nights she caught moments of magic without meaning. To a warm-up rehearsal, a casual performance, or a sound check where someone tested a microphone or tuned a violin. These little moments made her chest feel warm. They stayed with her long after the sound faded. That night, she swept the last corner of the stage. She noticed something different. The piano lid was open, and a faint bit of stage light reflected off the keys. Usually, the lid was kept closed after rehearsals. But earlier that day, one of the performers had been practicing in a rush and left without closing it. Lyra stopped sweeping. Her eyes lingered on the open piano, then she tore her gaze away and forced herself to keep working. She always tried to respect boundaries, even invisible ones, but the piano kept pulling her attention, as if every key was softly calling her name. After finishing her tasks, she stood still for a long moment. The hall was so quiet that she could hear her own breathing. She glanced at the exit, then at the piano again. Her hands felt warm and anxious, and a small ache grew inside her chest, an ache she had felt many times before but had never acted on. 5 minutes, she whispered to herself. Just 5. She set her mop aside and slowly walked toward the piano. Her steps were slow, almost hesitant, like she was afraid the stage might reject her if she moved too quickly. She reached the piano bench and gently touched its edge. The wood felt smooth under her fingertips, familiar in a strange way, as if she had known it for years, despite never sitting here before. She lowered herself onto the bench. Her heart beat faster than usual, and she placed her hands on her lap, taking a deep breath. Then, slowly, she lifted her hands and let her fingers hover over the keys. The first note she pressed was soft, so soft she almost couldn't hear it. But it was enough. A small smile touched her lips. She pressed another key, then another, letting the notes form something gentle and fragile. The melody that rose from her fingers was one she had composed when she was younger, during a hard moment in her life. It was a simple tune but full of feeling. As she played, the empty hall no longer felt empty. Her music filled the space with warmth and sadness and hope all mixed together. She closed her eyes, letting old memories rise like dust in sunlight. Her fingers moved slowly at first, then with more confidence. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She wasn't trying to sound perfect. She was just letting her heart speak in the only language that had ever felt completely honest to her for those minutes. She wasn't a stage cleaner. She wasn't someone people walked past without noticing. She wasn't part of the background. She was simply a person who loved music. When she finally stopped, her hands rested on the keys for a moment before she lifted them away. A long breath left her lips, and she opened her eyes slowly. The hall felt different now. Lighter, warmer. Like she had shared a small secret with the building itself. Lyra stood up, closed the piano lid gently, and whispered, "Thank you." As if the piano were a friend who had listened to her, she picked up her mop and walked toward the exit, ready to go home. She had no idea that someone else had been in the building during those moments. She had no idea that someone had heard her play. Someone who would change her path in a way she'd never expected. But for now, she was simply happy in the quiet glow of her small, private moment. And she didn't know that this moment, soft as it was only the beginning of something much larger than she ever imagined. The next evening arrived with its usual routine. The sun had gone down early, leaving the streets outside the arts center covered in a soft blue shadow. A few performers were still inside packing up their instruments, chatting quietly about their day and making plans for tomorrow. It all felt familiar and calm. Nothing in the air suggested that something important was about to happen. Lyra walked through the back door of the building with her work bag hanging from her shoulder. She greeted the security guard with a small smile, then made her way to the main hall. Her steps echoed gently across the empty corridors, mixing with the faint smell of wood polish and stage dust. This place always felt like a second home to her. Even though she never quite felt like she belonged to its bright world, she didn't know that someone had been waiting to speak with her since the day before. A man named Rule, the assistant conductor of the center's orchestra, was standing in the shadows of the side hallway near the stage entrance. He wasn't hiding on purpose. He was simply lost in thought, trying to make sense of what he had heard the previous night. He had returned to the building late to collect a forgotten notebook. And that was when he heard the soft sound of the piano drifting through the hall. He remembered stopping in his tracks. At first, he thought it was one of the students practicing after hours. But the melody had something different, something honest and emotional. Something that made him freeze for a moment and just listen. He followed the sound quietly, not wanting to disturb the musician. When he reached the side of the stage, saw her, the young cleaner who worked nights, Lyra. He had seen her many times before, always silent, always working with care. But he never imagined she could play like that. The music wasn't loud or dramatic. It wasn't the kind of performance meant to impress an audience. It was something gentler, something that felt like a piece of her heart laid softly across the keys. He wanted to speak to her right then. But she left so quickly after playing that he didn't get the chance. So he returned the next evening, hoping to find her again now. As Lyra entered the hall, rolling a small cart of cleaning supplies, Rule stepped out from the shadowed walkway. "Excuse me," he said gently. Lyra startled and almost dropped the cloth she was holding. She turned toward him with wide eyes, unsure if she had done something wrong. She recognized him immediately. She had seen him countless times guiding musicians, raising his hands during rehearsals, helping shape performances. "Oh, good evening," she said softly. Rule offered a friendly smile. "I'm sorry if I surprised you. I've been waiting to talk to you for a moment." Lyra felt her heartbeat quicken. She tried to think if she had missed a task yesterday or broken some rule. "Did I do something wrong?" No, Rule said quickly, shaking his head. Nothing like that. I wanted to ask you something. About the piano. Lyra froze. Her breath caught in her throat. She felt a wave of heat rush up her neck. The piano. Yes, he said, stepping a little closer, not in an intimidating way, but with quiet curiosity. I heard you playing last night. Lyra's cheeks warmed even more. She looked down at her shoes, gripping the edge of her cleaning cart. She felt embarrassed, even exposed, as if someone had read pages from a private journal she'd never meant to show anyone. I'm sorry, she whispered. I shouldn't have. I only played for a few minutes. I didn't think anyone was here. I won't do it again if it caused any trouble. Rule blinked in surprise. Trouble? No, not at all. I came to say the opposite. He paused, letting his words settle gently. You play beautifully. Lyra's head lifted slightly. She didn't speak, but her eyes revealed disbelief. I'm serious, he continued, his tone warm and sincere. There is something very real in the way you play. It's rare. Most people spend years trying to make their playing sound honest, but you already have it. She swallowed, unsure how to respond. Where did you learn? He asked. Just from someone in the neighborhood when I was younger, she said quietly. I'm not trained. I only remember bits and pieces. Rule shook his head gently. Well, whatever you learned stayed with you in a special way. I'd like to hear more of it, if you're willing. Lyra wasn't sure what to say. Her first instinct was to refuse. She wasn't a performer. She wasn't someone people watched or listened to. She had never imagined someone like the assistant conductor would show interest in anything she did. I don't know, she murmured. Rule noticed her hesitation and softened his expression. There's no pressure. I just think you have a gift. And gifts like that shouldn't stay hidden forever. His words made her chest tighten in a strange mix of fear and hope. She didn't know which feeling was stronger. He took a small step back, keeping his distance comfortable. If you ever feel like playing again, I'd love to listen. That's all. He turned as if he were about to leave, giving her space, but then he paused and looked at her once more. Would you play something now? He asked softly. Lyra's eyes widened. She shook her head quickly. I couldn't. Not right now. I'm working. And I'm not good enough to play in front of anyone. Rule's smile was gentle, understanding, not forceful. All right. I won't rush you. He stepped back toward the hallway. But I meant what I said. You have something special. When you're ready, even if it's just 5 minutes side, be glad to hear it. With that, he left the hall, leaving Lyra alone with her thoughts, her cart, and the quiet piano sitting in the corner like a friend waiting patiently. She stood still for a long moment, feeling her pulse pounding in her ears. She never imagined someone would hear her playing. She never imagined someone would actually say she was good. As she cleaned the stage that night, she kept replaying the conversation in her mind. She wondered why someone like Rule would bother talking to her. She wondered if he was just being polite. She wondered if she had embarrassed herself without realizing it. But most of all, she wondered why his words made her heart feel strangely light. When she finished cleaning, she sat again on the edge of the stage, just like she had the night before. She didn't go near the piano. Not tonight. She didn't trust her hands not to shake. She wasn't sure she could play anything after what had happened, but she let herself sit there in the quiet. Letting the memory of her own music drift through her mind, she didn't know that Rule's curiosity wasn't going to fade. He had a habit of recognizing potential, even when the world didn't see it. And in Lyra's music, he had heard something rare, something worth bringing into the light. The next few days passed quietly. Lyra continued her work as usual, but she felt different inside. She found herself glancing toward the piano more often. She wondered if Rule would appear again. Some part of her wished he wouldn't, so she wouldn't have to face the fear of disappointing him. Another part of Hertha's small, brave part she rarely listened to hoped he would. 3 nights later, the hall was completely empty. No rehearsals had been scheduled that day, so the stage felt untouched and silent. Lyra finished sweeping and stood near the edge of the stage, looking at the piano. She didn't hear any footsteps and no voices came from the hallways. She felt alone. Again, completely alone. She took a deep breath and walked toward the piano. Her fingers hovered over the keys, trembling slightly. She closed her eyes and pressed the first note. Then another. Slowly, the familiar melody returned, shaping itself in the quiet air. But she didn't know someone was listening. Rule stood at the back of the hall, watching quietly. He hadn't meant to surprise her this time. He simply walked in to collect a sheet he had left in the stands earlier. But when he heard the faint sound of the piano, stopped moving instantly. There she was again, playing softly, honestly, beautifully. He didn't interrupt this time. He let her finish, standing still in the shadows. And when she finally lifted her hands from the keys, breathing out slowly, he spoke. That, he said gently, was even more beautiful than the first time. Lyra's hands froze above the piano keys. Her heart jumped, and she turned quickly toward the voice. Rule stepped forward from the dim aisle, his footsteps quiet but steady. She looked at him with wide eyes, caught between embarrassment and confusion. "I didn't mean to startle you," Rule said softly as he approached. "I was on my way out when I heard the piano. I wanted to listen without breaking the moment." Lyra slowly stood from the bench, feeling her face grow warm. "I didn't know anyone was here," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You weren't doing anything wrong," he assured her, but even with his gentle tone, she felt exposed. She picked at her sleeve nervously as he came closer, though he kept a respectful distance. "Can I ask you something?" he said. She nodded uncertainly. "Have you ever thought about playing for an audience? Not a large one. Maybe something small? Something simple." Lyra shook her head quickly. "No, never. I'm not a performer. I only play when I am alone." "Why?" Rule asked. "Because." She paused, searching for the right words. "Because I don't think I'm good enough. And because music is personal. I'm afraid if people hear it, it won't feel like mine anymore." Rule took a moment to understand her words. Then he said, "I think your music feels personal because it comes from a real place. That's exactly what makes it powerful." Lyra didn't reply. She lowered her gaze. Rule continued gently. "Our center is hosting a charity concert in 2 weeks. It won't be huge, but it matters. We need one small piano piece to open the performance. The original performer had to step away due to travel plans." He paused thoughtfully. "I believe you could play it." Her head snapped up. "Me? Yes." She stared at him, stunned into silence. A strange mix of fear and something warm rushed through her chest. "No, it's sudden," Rule said. "And I'm not asking you to say yes right now. But I want you to think about it. You have something rare, Lyra. You shouldn't hide it forever." She stepped back a little, overwhelmed. "I don't know. I've never played for anyone. I've never studied properly. I don't have experience or confidence or you don't need all of that," he cut in gently. "Not for this. You only need honesty in your playing. You have that already?" Lyra pressed her lips together, unsure of what to say. "Would you sit for a moment?" he asked, pointing to the stage steps. She nodded slowly and walked with him. They sat side by side, though with a bit of space between them. The hall was quiet. The kind of silence that feels alive. "You love music," Rule said. "It shows in every note you play. I've listened to countless rehearsals, performances, training sessions. Many people play correctly, but only a few play sincerely. You're one of the few." Lyra lowered her eyes. "I don't know how to explain it," she whispered. "When I play, it's like I'm remembering something I almost forgot. Like I'm speaking without words." "Exactly," Rule said. "That's what music should be." A soft sigh escaped her. "But I'm scared." "Everyone is. The first time," he replied. "Fear doesn't mean you're not ready. It just means the moment matters." They sat quietly for a few seconds. "Will you at least consider auditioning?" he asked. Lyra wrapped her hands together. "Auditioning? Just a small one," Rule said. "Not formal. Not strict. You can play something you already know. I'll be there, and a couple of the event organizers will listen. That's all." Her stomach tightened at the thought. "This isn't pressure," he added calmly. "If you try and decide it's not for you, that's fine. I won't push you beyond what you're comfortable with." Lyra breathed slowly and nodded in a tiny, hesitant motion. "I can think about it. Rule smiled gently. That's all I ask. He stood up, picked up a folder he had left near the front row, then turned back to her. When you're ready, I'll help you prepare. If you choose to. Lyra nodded again, watching him walk out through the side door. When he was gone, she stared at the piano across the stage. It seemed different now, bigger somehow, or maybe closer. The idea of playing in front of people terrified her. But a tiny spark inside her wondered, what if she tried? She stood slowly, walked back to the piano, and placed her fingers on the keys. She played a soft chord. Then a line of her melody. Then a little more. The hall filled with sound that felt warm and trembling. She whispered, "Could I really do this?" The next morning, she woke with her heart still unsettled. All day, as she worked at her daytime cleaning job in another building, she found her mind returning again and again to the conversation. Every time the thought of auditioning appeared, her stomach tightened. But she couldn't shake the image of Rule listening with genuine interest. That night, when she returned to the art center, she almost expected Rule to be waiting. But he wasn't there. The hall was calm and empty. She cleaned as usual. But her movements felt slower, her thoughts louder. After finishing her tasks, she approached the piano again. She hesitated only a moment before sitting down. Her fingers felt cold. Her breath felt unsteady. She tried to play the melody she had played the night before, but her fingers stumbled. The notes were messy and unsure. She stopped. "I can't do this," she whispered to herself. Then she pressed her palms against her knees, took a slow breath, and tried again. This time the notes came more gently. They weren't perfect, but they were honest. Her hands remembered the deeper meaning behind the melody, and the music found its shape again. She played until she felt comfortable enough to breathe normally. When she stood up to leave, she didn't know someone had passed by the hall door and heard a bit of her playing. A cellist named Tavo paused for a moment, listening. He didn't see who was inside, but the sound intrigued him. He thought it must be one of the trainees. He made a mental note to mention it to Rule tomorrow. The next night, Rule did approach her. "Have you thought more about the audition?" he asked. Lyra wiped down a railing and nodded slightly. "A little," and she swallowed. "I think maybe I can try." "Just try." Rule smiled warmly. "That's wonderful. It's just an audition. Nothing final." Lyra gave a nervous laugh. "It doesn't feel small to me," "I know," he said. "But I'll help you. We can practice together after your shift if you want." Her eyes widened. "Practice? With you? If you're comfortable, I can guide you with basics. Not to change your style, only to help you feel confident." Lyra hesitated, but then nodded. "Okay, we can start tonight if you'd like," Rule offered. She looked toward the clock. She had finished most of her work, and there was nothing urgent left. A nervous breath escaped her. "Tonight is okay." Rule walked to the piano and opened the lid for her. "Let's start with something small. Play the melody you played yesterday. I want to hear it again. Just relax." Lyra sat down slowly, her heartbeat loud in her ears. She took a breath, placed her trembling fingers on the keys, began to play. Her hands shook at first, but once the melody carried her, she forgot Rule was even there. She drifted into the sound, just like she always did when she played alone. When she reached the last note, the silence that followed felt gentle. "Good," Rule said, nodding. "Very good." Lyra turned her head slightly. "It wasn't perfect. It doesn't need to be perfect," he answered calmly. "It needs to be true." And it was. He sat beside her at the bench, leaving a respectful space. "Now try it again. And this time, don't worry about how it sounds to me. Play it the way you would if you thought no one was listening." Lyra lifted her fingers and began playing again. This time, the music flowed more naturally. Her shoulders relaxed, her breathing slowed, and she let her thoughts fade. When she finished, Rule smiled. "There it is. That's your real sound." Lyra looked down shyly. "It still scares me." "That's normal," he replied. They practiced for almost an hour, soft adjustments, gentle guidance, simple exercises. Nothing harsh, nothing overwhelming. Rule encouraged her whenever she hesitated, and by the end of the session, She felt slightly less tense. As they closed the piano, Rule said, "Tomorrow night we'll practice again. And the night after that, when the audition comes, you'll be ready." Lyra nodded slowly. "Thank you. For helping me?" "Not helping," he said kindly. "I'm guiding the path you've already started walking." When he left for the night, Lyra sat for a moment longer on the empty stage. She felt tired, but in a good way, a warm way. She whispered to herself, Maybe I really can do this." She didn't know that in just a few days the audition would arrive faster than she expected, and with it, a turning point she would never forget. The hours after that unforgettable night felt different for him. Something inside had shifted, though he could not explain it in words. He woke the next morning with the same tired body, the same small room, and the same routine that waited for him at the theater. But there was a new feeling in his chest, a soft glow that refused to fade. It came from seeing how people reacted when they heard him play. It came from the way the hall became silent, not out of emptiness, but out of awe. It felt like a sign, maybe small, maybe fragile, but a sign that his music did matter. He spent the early morning sitting on the edge of his bed, still thinking about the night before. He replayed every moment in his mind, the feeling of the keys under his fingers, the surprised faces, the applause he never expected. He did not know why people liked it so much. He had only played what his heart carried. But maybe that was enough. At the theater that day, everything looked the same, yet nothing felt the same. The building still smelled of old wood and heavy curtains. The lights still warmed the hall with their soft glow. The workers still moved around, busy with their duties. He greeted them with a small smile, and they nodded back. Unaware of the storm of emotions inside him, he walked toward the stage like he always did. But this time, he paused halfway. He looked at the large space, imagining it full again the way it had been the night before. He imagined sitting at the piano, not as a cleaner, but as someone who belonged there. It felt strange, almost unreal. He shook the thought away and reminded himself that dreams were not facts, they were just dreams. Still, it could not help turning his head toward the piano. It stood quietly in the corner, its cover draped neatly over the keys. He felt a pull toward it, almost as if it was calling him, but he resisted. This time, he did not touch it. He had made a promise to himself to respect the instrument, the stage, and the rules that were not written but implied. He would not sneak in a moment of playing unless he had permission, all day long. He cleaned the aisles, polished the banisters, wiped the seats, and checked the stage edges. But his mind was not on the work. Every sound reminded him of a note. Every motion seemed connected to rhythm. His heart beat like a soft drum. He wanted to play again, but he did not want problems. He had already been lucky that the staff had not scolded him the night before as he moved through the backstage hallway. He overheard two technicians talking. He did not mean to listen, but their words floated toward him. "Did you hear that piano piece yesterday?" one asked. "Yeah," the other replied. "I thought it was recorded. Can't believe it was someone playing live." Whoever that was. "They're talented." He froze, his broom still in his hands. His heart thumped harder. They were talking about him as music. He stepped away before they noticed him. His face warm with embarrassment and disbelief. He finished his shift quietly and walked home while the sun dipped behind the buildings. The sidewalks were crowded, but he moved through them like a ghost lost in thought. For the first time in a long time, he wondered about his life. He had never allowed himself to ask questions like, "What if?" or "Could I?" because answers to those questions often led to disappointment. But now, something new was forming in him, something like courage, that night. He sat at the little table in his room and took out an old notebook. It was thin, its pages bent and uneven. He opened it and wrote a few words. "Maybe I can try." Well, he stared at the sentence for a long time. It looked silly, childish even, but it was the truth. Maybe he could try. Not to be famous, not to become a star, and not to win anything. But maybe he could try to give his music a chance to exist outside his heart in the days that followed. He'd practiced whenever he found an empty public piano in a nearby park. It was not the same as the beautiful grand piano at the theater, but he did not complain. People walked by without noticing him, and he preferred it that way. He played softly, his hands moving slowly, shaping the melody he had played on stage that night. He wanted to polish it, understand it, and make it stronger. One afternoon, while he sat playing, an elderly man stopped near the piano. He wore simple clothes and held a small bag of groceries. The man listened quietly for a while before speaking. "That's a peaceful tune," he said kindly. The cleaner looked up, startled. "Oh, thank you. I'm just practicing. It sounds like something from the heart," the man replied. "Not many people play like that anymore." The cleaner smiled softly. Compliments still felt foreign to him. "I just play what I feel. Keep doing that," the man said before walking away. Those words stayed with him. They were simple, but they felt important. Every evening, he returned to the park piano. Every day, the melody grew clearer. He did not write sheet music or talk about it with anyone. He only played. He felt like the world disappeared whenever his fingers touched the keys. The noise of cars, the chatter of people, the stress of life, it all faded into the background. Back at the theater, people still whispered about the mysterious piano player. Some said it happened during rehearsal. Others thought it was part of a new show. No one suspected him. He kept his head down, quietly doing his job, but one person began to look at him differently. It was the assistant stage manager, a calm and observant person who noticed things others missed. They had seen him wiping the piano carefully every night after finishing his cleaning tasks. They had seen how he paused near it, almost with affection. They had glimpsed something in his eyes: respect, longing, and a strange familiarity with the instrument. One evening, as he was about to clock out, the stage manager approached him. "Hey," they said softly. He turned, unsure if he had done something wrong. "Yes, I wanted to ask you something," they continued. "Do you play the piano?" His breath caught. He felt the broom in his hands grow heavier. His mind spun. Should he deny it? Should he admit it? Would he get in trouble? He lowered his eyes. A little. "Just for myself." Stage manager studied him, their expression gentle. "I thought so. The way you look at the piano, people who don't play never look at it like that." Felt his cheeks warm. "I'm sorry if you didn't do anything wrong," they said quickly. "Don't worry. I just wanted to know." He nodded, unsure what else to say. The stage manager smiled kindly, then walked away. But the conversation left him uneasy. He did not know whether they suspected he had been the one who played on stage. He hoped they didn't. Later that night, as he lay in bed, he could not shake the feeling that something was changing again. Life had a strange way of moving, like a melody shifting from soft to strong without warning. He wondered if the theater would ever give him a chance. But he also knew chances did not come just because one hoped they came. Because one prepared, and so he prepared. He practiced every day. He cleaned the theater with more care than ever. He watched performers with new eyes, learning from their focus and discipline. He listened to the way the hall breathed during shows, the audience's whispers, the rise and fall of emotions, the silence that wrapped around every important moment. He admired how performers controlled the room with nothing but their craft. He dreamed, but he also worked. One evening when he entered the theater, he found the stage completely empty, except for the grand piano. The lid was open. A bright spotlight shone on it. There was a note placed on the keys. His heart pounded as he walked closer. He reached for the note with trembling fingers. It said, "Play if you want. No one will stop you." He looked around, but no one was in sight. The hall was still. The air felt warm, almost welcoming. He carefully placed the note aside and sat at the piano. For a moment, he did not move. He just breathed. Then he lifted his hands, and he played. Not softly, not cautiously, but fully. He poured everything into the keys: the loneliness, the struggle, the tiny moments of hope, the unexpected kindness from strangers, the dreams he had hidden for years. His music filled the empty hall with emotion strong enough to make the air feel heavy. He did not know it yet, but someone was listening from the shadows. Someone who could change his life forever. The hall was quiet in a way that made every sound feel bigger. His music flowed through the space like it belonged there, rising and falling as if it had a life of its own. He didn't think about how he looked or whether he made mistakes. He simply played, letting everything inside him pour out without holding back. When the final note faded, he kept his hands on the keys for a moment, breathing slowly. His chest felt warm, almost light. It was the kind of feeling he wished he could keep forever. He finally stood up and gently closed the lid of the piano. The hall remained empty and still. He thought he was alone, but someone stepped forward from the shadows. He froze. His heart jumped into his throat. He recognized the person. It was the same stage manager who had spoken to him a few days earlier. They were watching him with an expression he couldn't understand. It wasn't anger. It wasn't disappointment. It was something softer, almost proud. "I knew it was you," stage manager said quietly. He lowered his eyes, nervous. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have." "You didn't do anything wrong," they interrupted. "That was beautiful." Truly, he didn't know what to say. Compliments still felt unreal to him. The stage manager stepped closer. "How long have you been playing like that?" He hesitated. "Since I was young. But I never learned properly. I just taught myself." The stage manager nodded thoughtfully. "Well, you have something special. I'm not saying that to make you feel better. I mean it. There are trained performers who can't play with that kind of honesty." Felt his breath catch again. Honesty, yes. That was the only thing he had ever played with. The stage manager looked around the empty hall. "Listen, tomorrow afternoon, there's a rehearsal for a small community event the theater is hosting. Nothing fancy. Just a friendly gathering. Someone was supposed to play piano for a short segment, but they canceled last minute. Would you like to try?" His heart thudded so hard he feared it might be heard. "Me play? In front of people?" "Yes," the stage manager said with a calm smile. "Only if you want to. No pressure." "But I think you should," he swallowed. Part of him wanted to run away. Another part, small, shaking, but brave, wanted to say yes. "I can try," he whispered. "Good," the stage manager replied. "Be here at 3 tomorrow. And don't worry about what to wear or how to act. Just be yourself." He nodded slowly, still unsure if he was dreaming. That night he barely slept. His thoughts spun in circles. Fear mixed with excitement. What if he played badly? What if the audience didn't like his music? What if they laughed or ignored him? But then he remembered how it felt when the hall had filled with his sound, and how free he had felt in the morning. He woke earlier than usual. He sat on his bed for a long time, breathing slowly to calm himself. He didn't own fancy clothes, but he washed his simple shirt and made sure it looked clean. He combed his hair carefully. It wasn't perfect, but it was the best he could do. Before leaving, he looked at himself in the small, cracked mirror. "Just try," he whispered to his reflection. "That's enough." When he arrived at the theater, the atmosphere felt different. People carried equipment, arranged seats, adjusted microphones, and checked schedules. He didn't get in anyone's way. He stood quietly to the side, clutching the strap of his small bag. The stage manager spotted him and walked over. "You're here good? Ready?" He nodded, though he wasn't sure he truly was. They guided him toward the stage. The piano waited there, shining under the lights. Seeing it made his hands tremble. He touched the keys gently, letting his fingers adjust to the smooth surface. The stage manager spoke softly. "Just play like you did yesterday. You don't need to impress anyone." He took a deep breath. The rehearsal began. A few people sat in the first rows, taking notes and preparing for the event. They weren't an audience, not really, but their presence made him nervous. He placed his hands on the keys and closed his eyes. He started to play. The melody flowed differently this time. Not weaker, not stronger, just different. It carried a mix of fear and hope. But as the music grew, his fear loosened its grip. His hands moved with more confidence. He let his feelings guide him. When he finished, there was silence for a moment. Then someone said, "That's really good." Another person nodded. "Beautiful piece." The stage manager turned to him. "See? You belong here more than you think." He felt heat rush to his face. He didn't know how to respond except with a shy smile. During the event later that evening, the hall filled with people. They weren't wealthy donors or highly trained critics. They were ordinary people, families, neighbors, friends of the theater staff. The atmosphere was easy and warm. Still, when it was his turn to go on stage, his legs felt heavy. He walked slowly, afraid he might fall. The lights were bright, making it hard to see the audience clearly. Maybe that was a blessing. He sat at the piano. His hands hovered above the keys. He breathed in deeply, remembering the quiet of yesterday's empty hall, the glow in his chest, and the small notebook on his table that said, "Maybe I can try." He began to play. The notes started soft, almost like a whisper. The melody grew with each moment, rising gently like dawn breaking over the horizon. The room shifted. People stopped talking. Some leaned forward. Others closed their eyes. He played with everything he had. Every struggle, every lonely night, every small dream he never dared to say aloud. When the final note faded, there was a heartbeat of silence, then applause. Warm. Real applause. It wasn't loud like a concert hall or dramatic like a show ending. It was sincere, filled with encouragement, appreciation, and something he had rarely received: respect. His chest tightened. He lowered his head to hide the emotion on his face. The stage manager was waiting for him backstage. "You did it," they said softly. He nodded, unable to speak. After the event, several people approached him. They asked if he composed the melody. They said it moved them. One person said it reminded them of something from their childhood, a memory they had forgotten until now. Another said it felt like a story told without words. He didn't know how to handle so much kindness at once. He simply thanked them quietly. Later that evening, when almost everyone had left, the stage manager approached him again. "There's something else," they said. "A representative from a local music group was here tonight. They help unknown musicians perform at small events, festivals, and gatherings. They liked your performance." His eyes widened. "They want to meet you," the stage manager continued. "Nothing big yet, just an opportunity. But opportunities matter." He felt his knees weaken slightly. "They want me?" "Yes, they see potential in you." He stood still for a long time, trying to take in the words. He had spent most of his life being invisible, someone who swept floors, cleaned corners, and stayed out of the way. Now, suddenly, people wanted him to be seen. "I don't know if I'm good enough," he whispered. "You are," the stage manager said firmly. "You proved that today." He let out a shaky breath. The fear inside him didn't disappear, but something else grew bigger: hope. In the weeks that followed, his life changed slowly. The music group invited him to play at small community events. He performed at libraries, parks, and local gatherings. Some audiences were small, some were bigger. But every time he gave the same honesty through his music, people began to recognize him. Not as a cleaner, not as a stranger, but as someone with a gift. He still worked at the theater, but things felt different. The staff treated him with a warmth they hadn't shown before. Some asked when his next performance was. Others asked if he could play for short rehearsal sessions. He found himself smiling more than he ever had. One evening, after finishing a small outdoor performance, he sat on a bench and watched the sunset. The sky was painted in soft colors, and for the first time in his life, he felt proud not of fame or success, but of trying, of allowing himself to step onto a stage meant for someone else. He opened his old notebook, the one with bent pages and faded lines. Beneath the sentence he had written weeks ago, "Maybe I can try," he added a new line. "I did try, and I will keep trying." Months later, something unexpected happened. The theater planned a special evening dedicated to local performers who had risen from humble places. His name was on the list. He would play on the same stage where he had once pushed a broom across the floor. The night of the event, the hall filled with people. Lights shone brightly. The air buzzed with excitement. He stood backstage, holding his trembling hands together, reminding himself to breathe. When he walked onto the stage, he didn't feel like the cleaner who once played secretly in the dark. He felt like someone who belonged. He sat at the piano. He played a new piece, one shaped by every moment of his journey. It was a piece filled with gratitude, struggle, and quiet triumph. The hall listened. Every person, every heart. When the final note faded, the applause was stronger than anything he had ever heard. It felt like a wave lifting him. He didn't become a world-famous star. He didn't chase fame. He didn't need to. He became something far more meaningful, a person who found his place, his voice, and his courage. On stage, under the warm lights, he lifted his head and smiled. For the first time, he wasn't just a cleaner. He was a performer, and his journey had only just begun.